Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the Writer's Room. I am your host, the Night Editor, Kat Rocha, and tonight we have with us David J. West. He's a writer of dark fantasy and weird westerns, as well as the occasional Lovecraftian horror. And sitting beside me this evening is...
As always, your pal, Jay Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit. Introduce yourself, David.
Hey, I'm David West. I like to write dark fantasy and weird westerns because the voices in my head won't quiet down until I can share them with someone else.
Well, of course, they want to come to the party.
I think that's an experience.
They got to get out.
That's an experience I think a lot of writers have where you aren't going to sleep until it's on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much. They're in there crying to get out.
And sitting in with us this evening is Fianna.
The famous Florida woman.
Yes.
I didn't know where she was from.
Yeah, she's from Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely has been surviving Florida.
Yes.
Good deal.
But yes, half of Pulprev out there has made my father very happy because it's like, hey, it talks to that guy side of his brain that wants action and adventure. Amazing.
Well, I know that with Kat's father one Christmas, he was saying, he was sick of all this fiction or sci-fi fiction that was woke.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I don't get this stuff. What happened? I said, okay, I'll take care of you. Take care of you. And I got him a John Ringo book and a Larry Correa book. And I got him a whole bunch. He was like, this is where it's been hiding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, okay, I guess we'll just tear into it. And Fianna, chime in whenever you like. I guess the first question would be, well, what drives you to write?
For me, I just get these ideas in my head and I start playing around with the what ifs and they won't leave me alone. And since it won't leave me alone, I have to get to work on it and type it all out. And, I was putting together stories when I just was writing them in spiral notebooks for myself. I wasn't letting anybody see them. And I wrote stories when I was a kid. When I would play G.I. Joe, I'm sure it was these full blown Apocalypse Now type adventures. And as I get older, it's like, well, I'm still going to play with that. I'm still going to go there. Sometimes when I read history books, I like reading real bizarre history books, and I can't get away with, well, what if they had this? What if he had been there? What if she had done this? And the more that happens and I keep doing that, the more that the writing bug bites me.
Makes enough sense.
Yeah, and I like to play around with all the genres, so...
Yeah, you've done a wide range of different fiction. I mean, you've written sword and sorcery, you've written weird westerns, Lovecraftian horror, sci-fi, and right now you're tackling steampunk, right?
I've done it's touched on steampunk, yeah.
Okay, so what does your not steampunk world look like?
Oh, no, it's got aspects. It's just not the driving force. I think a lot of steampunk is about the world. And with this, it's still more about the characters, but I love the idea of throwing in some airships. So it's probably steampunk light.
It's probably a good thing, actually.
Yeah.
That is a genre that a little bit goes a long, long way.
Yeah, so I wasn't really focusing on that other than I wanted to throw in some airships and maybe just a little bit higher level tech than what 1870s generally thought of having. So it definitely was not the focus. The focus was a lot more magic in the blood because the gal on the cover looks right. The guy doesn't look right, but the girl looks right for being a great granddaughter of the Magus John Dee. So it was all about her being able to do some Enochian magic and things.
Nice.
This is a series I've been wanting to get to, but yeah, Kat?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, just from the cover art, I haven't had a chance to read this yet, but from the cover art, it seems to be more Western 18, like American 1800s, and not so much English Victorian 1800s.
Yeah, it starts out in well, the prologue's in China, up in the Himalayas, in a secret fortress. But for most of the book, it's in San Francisco, making their way east. And they get as far as Salt Lake, and then in book 2, it's kind of from somewhere in Wyoming to about as far as Pennsylvania somewhere. And then book 3 would take them to New York and finally to London, because she's got to put John Dee to rest back where he was initially buried, close to London in Mortlake. So and then my plans for the next book are gonna circle back around, taking them back to the Himalayas.
No, that's really cool that you're doing it that way, because I'm so used to people when they're playing with that time period, it's either very Victorian or New York, and the fact that you're spending a lot of time in the Wild West rather than high technology. I'm very interested to see what you do with that.
Well, the thing that always bothered me was that somewhere along the line, steampunk became whimsy.
Yeah.
And wacky. That was a real turnoff. This doesn't look that way.
No, I don't think so. And like I said, it's dealing with a lot more Western fantasy magic. And I did a lot of research about John Dee for the sake of this, and the villain, the Count of Saint Germain. And they meet a lot of other real historical personages from San Francisco heading east. Jesse James, Sitting Bull. No, wait, Crazy Horse. Sorry, Crazy Horse, not Sitting Bull.
Okay.
Helena Blavatsky.
Really?
Nice.
Madame Blavatsky, or however you say it. Yeah.
Yeah, I could be pronouncing it totally wrong.
I have no idea.
And I just had a lot of fun with that. And then I found out that historically, right around the time period that my characters are going through Virginia City, there was like a horrible fire that burned down almost the whole city. And I'm like, that's perfect! It's their fault!
Oh, Lordy.
So that historically happened, and I kind of am able to put that into the book as why it happened.
Do you get into them going through, was it Gold? No, not Goldfield. Gold. It's Gold something, but it's where Mark Twain got his start. In Nevada.
He was definitely there, but I didn't use him in this particular story.
But still, that's great. Okay,
Yeah.
I got a new one on my list that I gotta go check out.
Since before we get to the question from the listener, I do have one question. Since you're using a lot of real history, do you get into the phantom airships of the time?
I didn't really in this one, although I've definitely got opinions on that.
Cool.
So what kind of weirdness am I into? Hard magic, myth, monsters, powers. Definitely a lot of the supernatural monsters. I love throwing Porter Rockwell in. That's my main character in all my westerns, up against, a skinwalker here, or ghosts, or a werewolf. Sometimes it's, like a snake god or something that was worshipped by some Indians in some forgotten canyon. I love basing it off of real legend as much as I can. But sometimes I play with it. Supposedly here in Utah, there was a creature like the Loch Ness Monster in Bear Lake. And I don't know what to think of that. I did all the research I could on it. People still say that they see it a couple times a year. And I had to throw that one in. Just because.
I heard about that one in my cryptids research. So yeah.
Weird Western, cryptids. This sounds like your kind of thing, Kat.
Oh yeah, this is totally up my alley.
Yeah, so I have a lot of fun with it. And, sometimes I'll write a little more straight Western where there's not a monster, but it's grim, kind of Hateful Eight, spaghetti Western. I've really enjoyed that. So my latest Hell Dorado is loosely based on some gambling wars that happened up in the mountains. When I say gambling wars, I mean like miners were fighting over claims. So I played with that a little bit. Yeah, Home on the Strange is a very Lovecraftian
Okay.
themed
Is that Amigo?
weird Western. Yeah, that they're
Cool.
inhabiting a haunted mountain.
I always liked the Amigo. Very cool. We were going to ask you about another thing you've done, and that is something Kat and I are more familiar with, which is your Brutal series.
Yes. Yes, I've read Brutal.
Yeah, great.
One of my father's favorites.
Really?
It's so easy to have Pulp Rev around to make happy dads.
Yeah. Well, when Fianna said something to me about how much her dad enjoyed it, and I was trying to consider who am I dedicating the 9th book in the series to, I thought about what she said, so I just said to the fathers, because I thought about how much she told me he enjoyed it, and I thought about my friends that like it. We're all dads, so I'm like, yeah, this one's for the fathers.
Yeah, I got my dad Brutal as well, so. And he was all over. I think he finished it in a day, actually.
Wonder
Good
why
deal. Yeah,
the cover
ask
for
away.
Brutal didn't load up.
Oh, it didn't?
No.
Oh.
Huh. Okay. Well.
Sorry, we had a cover for Brutal, and the computer did not want it.
Yeah,
Apparently.
it does not seem to be agreeing with SteamYard, but whatever.
Anyway,
it's all good.
So tell those out there who are not familiar with it about Brutal.
So I love the Conan the Barbarian types, the hero swordsman fighting against sorcery and monsters. I've been a huge fan of the Conan type books, and I wanted to try my hand at that. And around the time that I was writing that, I finally had enough of putting my ego in check to say, this won't be under David West. This will be under pen name, solely for the fact of being able to coax Amazon's algorithms. Because if you're not a huge name like Neil Gaiman or Stephen King or something, most people only read what in their own little genre. And by writing historicals, weird westerns, fantasy, and some Lovecraftian horror, it kind of was putting a chain on my foot for Amazon to push those also bots, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so I thought, all right, I'm going to throw an experiment out here. I'm going to write this standalone sword and sorcery Brutal and put it out there under a pen name. James is my father's name, and Alderdice is actually his mother's maiden name. And I thought James Alderdice sounded like a fantasy writer's name, so I'm like, I'm going to go with that. And I put it out there in the summer of 2017, and it took off better than I thought. And so I almost immediately went into Amazon and changed it from just Brutal to part of the Brutal Sword trilogy.
Well, I think people are really hungry for more of the Howard-esque sword and sorcery.
Very much so.
It did well enough that I changed my mind of making it go from a trilogy that I decided I would do 10 books. So the 9th one is the one that just came out, and I'm going to kind of wrap up him holding the kingdom story in the 10th one. Although I've still got plans to do some earlier adventures, but I also want to do some adventures in the set in the same world. Most of the books I've gone in and I've attached maps to, so it's fun to play in your own little pond when you create that and all that, because I had fun with him being in like a northern Iceland type nation and then sending him down to a pseudo Aztec type realm. It was so funny to me. I got a 1-star review, I think, on that book because he said, "This isn't fantasy, this is all just Aztecs." like they're not Aztecs, but it's like that. But all right, whatever, dude.
I gotta admit though,
it's always good to have a crazy 1-star, because people will look and see you've got a bunch of 5 stars, and then they'll look and see, oh, he's got a 1-star. What's that say? And then if it's a crazy person, so much the better.
Yeah, because it's like, that's why I like the pulps. They put crazy elements in there that I've been missing.
Yeah,
well, Howard did that. That was basically Conan
constant.
was kind of walking into different time periods, and it didn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved it because sometimes it would almost be Gunpowder Age pirates, and then in Red Nails he's meeting people that are named Zuthul and Olmec. So
Yeah.
I love all that.
The sword or sellsword in the book. At the beginning, I thought this was going to be a man with no name holding a sword, but
Uh-huh.
it didn't really go that way. How did that character come about? Because he's not Conan.
No.
I came up with the idea as I was doing it that he was a man with no name, but I kind of wanted him to be pulling a heroic Yojimbo type thing. And
Which
I
I
kind of
like.
was like, how am I going to put some sorcery in this? How am I going to give him a different purpose? And the idea started to spawn on he's actually the king coming to set everything right in this wayward town. And he's a take no nonsense, became the king, not unlike Conan, but has this really strong thing of justice and doing things hands on himself. So I kind of just let it run with that and left the reveal at the end. And it was funny because so many reviews were like, I saw that coming a mile away. Then other people would be like, I didn't see that coming. So you can never please everybody.
Well, I like that you did that because the first book definitely brought back all those old, Conan feelings. But then
Yeah.
you get that reveal, and suddenly my mind immediately kind of went to Elric,
Yeah.
which I loved.
Not a bad direction to go in.
No.
Yeah, I'm a fan of so much of that it all bleeds through. I mean, I dedicated this one to Carl Edward Wagner because he's my other favorite fantasy writer.
Oh, very cool.
So one more before we kind of go over to more of your writing technique. There's one genre that I have not dived into yet, but I'm very curious. You on your bio, you say you write LDS weird fiction.
Yeah, my very first novel, I was raised Mormon, and so the basic premise with the Book of Mormon is that Christ, after he left the Holy Land, he came to America, and that there was all these people here. And so I grew up, with all that, and it fascinated me to think about all the possibilities of peoples here in the Americas that a lot of time people aren't thought of. So it's like the mound builders and all that. And I have just dived into weird Americana diffusionism, if you know what that is. So the idea that Vikings came here, Irish monks came here, Romans. There's people that say that Jews came and landed near Tucson. Have you guys ever heard of the Tucson lead plates?
No.
Heard of, but don't know anything about.
So much stuff. There's a lot of things that might be hoaxes. Who knows? But I think there's so much that I don't personally believe it's all hoaxes. I think there's definitely a lot of evidences of more intercontinental travel than people give ancients credit for.
I agree.
The Olmec heads look African.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things. They
Raw
found
too.
they found cocaine and marijuana in some of the Egyptian tombs, and it's like, where did they get that? They had to come to the New World to get that.
Well, do you know about Raw too?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you're talking about Kon-Tiki and Thor Heyerdahl.
Yeah, they made the boat out of papyrus and tried to sail it to South America and almost made it.
Yeah, and there was a guy just like in this last decade who made a Phoenician ship from, like 2,000 years ago and actually sailed it around the Horn of Africa and brought it into the Caribbean too. So he showed
Wow.
too. And he did that just like definitely in the last 10 years, maybe 8. So there's so many things out there that are just weird that automatically get labeled, oh, that's a hoax, that's a hoax. And I don't think they all are. I think there's definitely a lot of weird stuff out there that could denote other peoples. And that's not taking away from Native Americans, because I think sometimes there's been intermixing. Who knows? There's so many weird things we don't know. All the giant mound cities with their earthen pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of tied in with how I was brought up in the Book of Mormon. And reading the Book of Mormon, it's semi like the Bible type stuff. And I always thought about what it would be like if I had a Conan running around in this American wilderness set within like that kind of framework. So that's what my first novel ever, Heroes of the Fallen, was kind of set up like, so that there's Americana weirdness with diffusion, as well as saber-toothed tigers, some mammoths, and
That's a great idea.
bison. And it was kind of me playing with an American Tolkien type setting, if that makes sense. And I have the second book mostly done, and I've sat on it forever because I did the first book, I got it published with a small publisher, and that gave me some confidence to eventually break out on my own and go indie. But I always wanted the next book to be so much better that I sat on it for a long time, tinkering with it to just be better before it comes out.
Well, what I find fascinating about the concept is we've had a lot of writers on here who have worked in kind of a Catholic lore.
Yeah.
And we've gotten plenty of medieval and European lore. I don't think anyone, or I'm sure there has, but I haven't really seen anyone go crazy with the whole American lore that we have.
Well, that's the fascinating thing to me, is that they have found all kinds of things that we don't generally think of, like copper weapons. So there's been lots of copper knives and short swords found, copper spearheads, copper armor that's all decayed. And I just love that stuff because it gives a completely different look than what we usually expect with just buckskins or something. No matter who you say the culture was, whether you would say it was actually just Native American or not, it was definitely more advanced than what we generally think of. And I find that stuff fascinating. Because, it'd be intertribal war. Some places were building full walls around their cities, with, typical logs stacked up in a palisade, and then they would stucco over it to make it fireproof.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would look like a walled city. And, given enough time, 1,500 years, that stuff is mostly all rotted and fallen away. So we don't have the fascinating pyramids like in Central America. But if you go back that far, that stuff, there were these amazing cities. If you guys have ever looked up anything about Cahokia, there's amazing old cities out there that I just, it's a massive playground for my mind to go on the what if storytelling journey.
And the fact that a lot of the Aztec cities and towns had canals, and I mean just these huge complexes with these basically freeways of boats going through there. It's absolutely amazing. And
Oh yeah.
And then you go up further north. I read.
Are you talking about the Inca cliff cities?
No, actually, it's actual canals, like like Venice, but it was the Aztecs had them. And then you go to Mohawk, the Mohawk tribes in here in the United States. Well, now United States. There's a diary from a Dutch fur trapper from the 1600s, I think it was.
Or Journey into Mohawk Country?
Yeah, and his account of dealing with the Mohawks, they are far more advanced than we were taught in schools that I was aware of. And they had exactly what you're talking about, actual, like, what we would call cities with walls and thatched walls and or stucco walls and permanent settlements that they're wood, they're mud. They would, of course they wouldn't last, but they had them, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, and sometimes they would have set up so that the fort would have like this weird little maze entrance, so they could defend it against raiders. There's all kinds of things where they would definitely have some good intelligence about it. It's, you know, not everybody is just out on the plains with teepees. It's completely different. I've done a lot of research, you know, all through the Southwest too, visiting, you know, like Mesa Verde and all the cliff palaces. I love that stuff. So I've been almost everywhere in North America. Haven't been to Florida. That's about it.
Florida's a strange place. No one
I've
ever
wanted to
appears
go, but it's one of the
correctly here.
only states I haven't been to. So
It's
I
kind of
love
like
visiting
mythical.
anything archaeological or historical. That's the stranger the better.
Well, I know Florida's got a lot of archaeological and mythical stories.
Cryptids, yeah, the
Well,
stink ape.
Well, cryptids, you have, of course, the most famous looking for the Fountain of Youth. And people still to this day swear that it's there somewhere. So,
Mhm.
Fianna, you had a question. Go ahead and ask it.
Oh no! Like I honestly do enjoy the fact that more and more people in Pulp Rev are getting interested in like the you know, the whole Atlantis or Continent Mu angle, or even
Mhm.
Hollowed Earth. We need to bring back Hollowed Earth. That was fun.
I find that stuff fascinating. I've got all the books on Hollow Earth I could get my hands on. I started with the Smoky God, and then some of the other ones, and it's one of those things that I just love thinking about.
And you know what? A lot of the ancient civilization setups would be awesome for Hollowed Earth. You go in there, fight them, fight dinosaurs. They can
Yeah.
have laser beams if you want them to, with magical gems.
Well, one of the guys that wrote about a Hollow Earth claimed exactly that. There was this bizarre utopian city down there with light beams, and it was essentially pulp sci-fi underground. But he said it was all real.
Yeah. There's some fascinating stories, and even if they're made up, I just dig that stuff.
Oh, it's great material.
mhm.
So, oh, sorry, Fianna?
No, I was just gonna say it's okay to drop the wrench. You know, not everything has to be hard sci-fi based on our physics. Nope.
Yep.
No, yep. A good story is really what's important.
Okay, so you've had a lot of your work published in anthologies, and for the aspiring writers listening right now, which is primarily our audience, how do you go about finding and submitting to those anthologies?
Well, I generally have always looked to see what have they done already, and I try to scope out the person that's the editor or organizer, whoever is compiling the collection, or if there's a call for something, I try to see what do they like. And I have flat out made the decision on a bunch of things. I'm like, what I do is not for them. I
Mhm.
don't bother submitting it. I don't shotgun everywhere. I have done very targeted shots at places I wanted to be published. And that's actually helped me to be, you know, I probably have at least a 50% acceptance rate because of that. Because I go, I know what I do, I know what they're looking for. That's who I go for, you know, and there's something out there for everybody, no doubt about it. And you know, you keep your ear to the ground, you'll be able to find those places that look for you. Because if you just shotgun everything and send
Mhm.
everything with the to whom it may concern, they're just going to throw you in the slush pile.
In my own attempts, I got to admit the biggest problem I've had is it seems nigh impossible to find an open call that isn't woke. How did you work around that?
Definitely just networking. That's It's, you know, you talk to somebody else that leans that way, doesn't want to be a part of woke. What have they heard about? What are they putting together?
Okay.
There's been a handful of people that say I don't want woke material, and they went out and put their own publications together. I'm thinking of like Bruce Beatty with Story Hack and Sirsova. There's people out there that are like, we're gonna do what we want to do and not worry about woke.
Well,
So it's out there.
well, you've heard it here, guys. Story Hack and Sirsova.
Mhm.
Buy it regularly.
So those are ones that definitely do the kind of material that I like, that are putting story first.
I agree.
Mhm. So, with that said, when you're getting your stuff out there, getting reviews, dealing with the press, sometimes it can be kind of a minefield to navigate. How do you promote your work?
I generally try to always remind people, hey, if you could review that, that'd be great. You'd really help me out. I try to do it on a personal level again, so I'm not shotgunning it. I do have a thing in the back of the book saying, hey, if you enjoyed this, please leave a review. I don't know how much that really helps because people seem to be motivated by love and hate.
Yeah.
And you're just as likely to have someone hate your book and leave a review as love it and leave a review. So I think it definitely helps to always ask. So in the back of everything I've got, it's like, hey, if you enjoyed this, please leave a review. And then I always remind people. And then if I can hit up someone that I know has read it, I'm like, hey man, please leave a review because it's a struggle.
Yeah. That's something we've always stressed is if you like something, go to Amazon, review it. It makes that's more important than any magazine review.
Oh yeah, and I think I've read not too long ago that 15 is a magic number for Amazon. You want to have at least 15 if you can. Minimum. And then the algorithms say, oh, this is something. And then if you can get it up above 50, they're like, oh, I guess this really is something.
Well, I would have to say, even a negative review isn't a bad thing necessarily. There's been plenty of books I bought due to the negative reviews, and sometimes they're just fun to read. I mean, I think my favorite negative review for Scars was 2 stars, and it said, "This book weird."
That's all?
Yeah,
This
that's
book's
all.
weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Wonder
my
if it's a second
god.
language for him or something.
Oh boy. I mean, most of the time, if I do leave a review that's pretty much like a 1 or 2 star, it's because it didn't hit my wheelhouse the way I wanted to. And I try to warn other readers who expect certain things like, hey, this writer cared more about their actual personal views rather than a story. That sort of thing.
For sure. I try to review a lot of my friends' stuff, and I try to just read widely and leave a lot of reviews. And I try to be generally overly positive, but I'll still leave a lot of fours. And I think friends need to understand that if you've got nothing but 6 5s, people aren't going to believe that. If they've got 6
Yeah.
5s and 1 4, they're going to pay attention to that 4. And if it's a glowing 4, I think that helps them more than giving them a 7th 5-star, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Do you find that it actually you get more mileage from reviews on Amazon than you do like reviews on places online?
Like Goodreads?
Yeah.
I have never been able to really keep up with Goodreads. It's like I joined ages ago and got my own little author account page there, but I found it difficult to just keep up with it. Every once in a while I'll check it and I'll be like, "Oh, nice. I got some fan mail." on Goodreads, and I didn't know it for months because I'm not good at checking Goodreads at all.
I
And
need to
it
do
always
that.
kind of depends. Like if I leave a review from my phone, I think it automatically goes to Goodreads. But if I do it on my desktop, then it doesn't go to Goodreads, and I never bother to update it.
Where do you most often interact with your readers?
Um, Probably Twitter, but sometimes Facebook, and sometimes if there's live events, live events. I'm always a guest at the local cons here in Utah, and I've been a guest at like Denver's and Seattle's, and it's always nice when somebody just shows up and, hey, heard you'd be here.
That is
It's always a
nice.
good ego stroke.
Very nice.
What would you say is your favorite con right now?
My favorite con,
Yeah, convention.
I went to Salt Lakes. Was the only one I went to this last year. It's the only one I made it to.
We've thought about doing that one.
But generally I go to about 4 or 5 a year, as a guest, so it's always good. The writer cons in Utah, I really enjoy, like LTUE, because it's in February. They always have it's just good people, good networking. Because once you know more writers, you're able to get hooked up with, hey, this is getting put together. Do you want to be invited to this? Yes, and I'm still kicking myself for some invites that I didn't make it to this year. Sending stories to. But it's hard to say. I've had a good time. I've had a really good time at some very small cons in Idaho. We're talking like maybe a couple thousand people were there, but
you got to meet all of them.
If there's only a couple thousand people and you sell 50 books, it usually feels pretty dang good.
Well, that and sometimes those can be the most satisfying because you actually you have the time to meet with people and talk with them and build a lasting following.
Yeah. I think that's definitely helped with some of the smaller cons over the bigger cons. So
yeah,
I prefer. Go ahead.
So, I was going to ask. So, who are you reading right now?
I just finished a really interesting nonfiction conspiracy book by Mark Hoffman called Twilight Language, which really goes into the whole JFK conspiracy and what are the elite sorcerers doing. So that one was just fascinating because I'm always interested in the weird conspiracy stuff for inspiration. I'm reading a book, kind of a noir thriller, hard-boiled, called A Hell of a Woman by Jim Thompson. And then I'm starting another book by Sword and Sorcery by John Shirley. So I'm always reading like 2 or 3 at a time. And I bounce around.
John Shirley was definitely an early influence for me. I devoured his stuff all through college.
I haven't actually read him yet. I've just got it right here queued up to go.
Oh, wow.
But it looked like it'd be really interesting. So I'm like, oh, I got to get this.
I read most of his cyberpunk stuff, and I also read, he did a lot of, I guess, weird modern day setting, just bizarre stories. I don't know how else to put it.
No, it sounds up my alley.
So, do you have any other questions, either of you?
Fianna?
Well, I've noticed that whenever my dad's reading certain kinds of books, he'll key in on a vastly different array of things than I will. So it just proves to me that men and women have brains programmed in a bit different ways.
I definitely do that.
Yeah, but there's just it's just good to know that there's writers out there that will still try their darndest to appeal to the guys out there because they need some attention too,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I feel like every time I've done a lead female character, I feel like those books get neglected because my readers are looking more for the guy stuff. So.
What are your lead female characters like?
Well, Elizabeth D in My Time of Dying is pretty young, and she's just discovering that she's got magical powers through her bloodline, and is just discovering the quest that she has to put together to set her great-great-grandfather to rest because he had been abused by the Count of Saint Germain. And then I have another one that's fantasy called Iron Maiden, where Aisha is a former pirate, but she's got a little bit of dragon blood in her, giving her some slightly stronger abilities. So she's very tough. And by having a female warrior on the cover, I had a bunch of people that were like, oh, I don't think I'm going to read this one.
Yeah, unfortunately, certain contingents have really ruined that kind of more fun aspect that you can pull off with certain kinds of female characters, because I appreciate how crafty that character is. She kind of tries to outsmart people rather than being like a sledgehammer.
Yeah. So I'm hoping to release book 2 in that series early next year. I'm hoping by February, because that book is mostly done. But it was kind of bummed me out that it never took off like Brutal did.
Yeah, and I personally do like Iron Maiden, so I'll be waiting for it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot.
I think there's a real
I
need.
felt like it was a good book. I really enjoyed it, but
I think there's a real need to start reintroducing female characters that aren't completely ruined by woke politics.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, for the most part, unless it's an actual period piece, meaning like written in the 1800s or earlier, I don't read books with female protagonists because usually there's just a minefield of either wokeness or, as we would call it, Simone's Law, which comes from the author Gail Simone, where like inappropriate use of food in random places.
Or like
I have
Anita
missed
Blake.
that. I really like Red Sonja, but I didn't really buy a lot of those, so I'm missing the random placement of food. Please clue me in.
Well, it's not from Red Sonja. Wasn't reading. If she wrote Red Sonja, I did not read it because.
Oh yeah, she did Red Sonja for a long time.
Oh God, no. We read. Oh crap, what's his name?
It was Birds of Prey. We also read.
No, Sonja. Who the author?
Oming.
Oming. We read
Oming's
Oming's
version was great.
Oming's run was wonderful. No, in Birds of Prey, when Gail Simone was writing it, you'd have scenes where they're like fighting bad guys and kicking ass and talking about eating ice cream.
Or breaks to go eat something.
Okay.
Or they'd like randomly stop whatever they're doing in order to go get food. Barbara Gordon and her old rival are having this knockdown drag out fight where they're kicking each other's asses, and when they're done they sit together in their pajamas eating food and watching sitcoms. It's like, what the hell is this?
Oh, romance movies.
Oh, romance movies. There you go. It's just inappropriate use of food to show female bonding. It's just, no, I'm not doing that.
That's weird.
So hence Simone's Law.
Simone's Law, which
there will be a mention
So
of food
she
every
almost
5 pages.
certainly
Yes.
must have done that at some point in Red Sonja.
I'm sure she did. I'm totally sure she did.
She used to be a good writer. It's really sad to see that happen.
Well, food often replaces sex for a lot of females. So, obvious.
Take it for what it's worth. Okay.
So, I actually, if I see a book with a female protagonist, I will honestly check to say, okay, did a guy or a girl write this? If a guy wrote it, then I'll give it a chance. If a girl wrote it, I won't. Unfortunately, it's sad, but it's true because I've been burned one too many times.
It's funny. See, and I was really worried when I was writing Iron Maiden. I didn't want it to just be a guy with boobs, and my editor is a woman, so I was like, if I'm getting something totally wrong, you call me out on this, please.
Hey, if you've got a good editor who will do that's gold right there. So that's even more reason for me to check out your book then, because
yes, she has to be like kind of crafty, more so. How Xena had to sometimes just use her sheer wits to get out of a situation,
like the Groundhog Day episode.
Yes. So Iron Maiden has to pull a few things off kind of like that too.
Okay, that's now 2 endorsements for Iron Maiden. I'm all over that.
Is that James Aldrich or is it?
It's Alderdice because it's set in the
Alderdice.
same world as Brutal. It's just on a more southerly African-like continent. They actually
Okay.
mention the
I'm all over
cell
that.
star mutants. And I
I'm
actually
totally
planned
all
on
over it.
having a Oli is in Savage, and he's the guy
Okay.
that's with Aisha, and it's kind of slightly out of order.
Well, this is a
So,
promising
Fianna,
cover.
I don't know if you've read Savage, but it's taking place in what would be book 3 of Iron Maiden. Once they're
Oh,
actually
cool.
there's a continuity, it works out.
Okay, so I'm looking at the covers. I see she's got kind of a bronzed skin and blonde hair. Is this one of those lost races that Howard would always
It
make
should
up?
be dark hair. I think it's the light effect.
Oh, okay.
Well, she's got the amber eyes of the dragon there, which
Yeah.
I like. And I like that her armor is mimicking scales. So
Yeah.
Oh,
very cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are at the last 15 minutes.
Yes.
So at this point, usually we ask the guest, what do you want to promote? What do you want people to go out and check out?
Mhm.
If people like weird westerns and action adventure pulps, I would love it if they would check out Eldorado or any of the Cowboys and Cthulhu series. So I've got, Let Sleeping Gods Lie, Home on the Strange. I'm in the preliminary spot of thinking about the third book in that series, which will be a lot more Cthulhu based.
Very cool.
Old gods and new tricks. So
I like
I'm
that.
getting Carter Reed to get to work on the cover for that one.
I'm just
And then if you
picturing-
like fantasy, sword and sorcery, Madness of the King just came out. I'm hoping to get Iron Warrior out in a couple of months. And then I've got loads of plans for more sword and sorcery. Sword and sorcery is my bag. So between that and weird westerns, I'm gonna be trying to do as much as I can over 2022, just getting new material out there because I've got a decent amount of success for where I'm at as a writer, and it's good to keep that ball rolling and keeping people with more books coming out. And I just really enjoy it. I want to get them out there.
How long does it take you to write a book? I mean, from like first word down to, it's off to the publisher or off to the presses.
It kind of depends on the book. With Madness of the King, it's not super long. It's probably only about 50,000 words. But I started a little bit of it in September, then put it down to finish up Eldorado, then picked it up again throughout November and got it done and released in December. So that went pretty quick. But I've had other books that I've been sitting on forever, like Blood of Our Fathers. I mostly wrote years ago, and then I keep tweaking at it, and I want to get that out in the spring. That's the one. That'd be the next one that's kind of got a ancient America theme to it.
It's going to be your masterpiece.
I'm sure hoping so. I've got lots of people that are dying to read it since I kind of left them hanging with that first book. It ends on a cliffhanger, Heroes of the Fallen. So Blood of Our Fathers will take care of that when I actually get it out.
What do you currently, well, since this isn't out yet, currently, what piece of writing do you consider your best?
It always feels like the last thing I did, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because of the feeling of enjoying the moment of whatever I'm working on in particular. I'm so into it in the moment that I'll have that feeling of this is the best thing I've ever done. And then I'll release it and start getting panicky over people don't like it and is it that good? But generally I always feel like the most recent thing I've done is the best thing I've done. I kind of feel that way about Eldorado and Madness of the King because I was working on both of them in September, focused on Eldorado for October, and then once that was done I focused on Madness of the King, and both of them I felt like I was really throwing myself into and just giving them some depth with the entertainment that I just really loved. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, I can understand that whole process where you get just utterly absorbed in what you're working on, and that's kind of what you're living.
Yeah, and it's like Madness of the King, I think, is still completely recognizable next to Brutal, but it's different too. So, and that might work for some people, won't work for others. I don't know, but it's still a big passion project. I actually had a lot of fun there's a chapter in particular that I titled Brutal Reunion, where he actually bumps into a few of the robber bandits that he had met in Brutal that must have run away at some point, and he bumps into them again. I had a lot of fun with that chapter.
It's like, that's the worst luck ever. Oh my.
Yeah, they're like, wait a second, that's the sellsword from 2 years ago who came to Aldred.
Run.
Yeah, and he was poisoned, so he's been driven insane, which is why it's Madness of the King. But it was still fun.
It does sound fun, especially remembering how the character or the sellsword was in the first book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because he was very much more of a controlled and moral character. I mean, if he's gone mad.
Well, yeah, that happens when he gets poisoned. So could probably be more mad, but it's he's recovering, but he's still not himself, and meets some of the bandits, and they realize who he is before he does.
Okay.
Eventually, I need to get more books done on audio too.
Oh yes, definitely. That's how I do most of my writing. In the last
Or
reading in the last few years is through audio.
For Joe the Pagan, depending on what you like, if you like sword and sorcery, probably pick up Brutal first, and then if you like, if you would be interested in weird westerns with cryptid creatures and ghosts and gunfights, then probably Let Sleeping Gods Lie or Scavengers.
And definitely, Joe, if you pick either up and read them, please let us know what you think.
Yes.
And leave a review, of course.
Oh yeah, reviews are life. I think as soon as I read Scars, I made sure to leave a review right away, because
I
you've got
greatly
to get
appreciated that.
you got to get a handful on there as social proof for other people.
Yeah, and I really did appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's like every time I have a book coming out, I try to have at least a couple lined up right away to get some out there.
Well, next time you can email me and I can try and do that.
Oh, for sure. Thoughts on writing westerns in contemporary settings? I've played with it, but I haven't gotten anything published yet in that, but I'm all for it, because I grew up in Montana and I currently live in Utah, so I've almost always been in the American West. So westerns with contemporary settings are great. I really enjoyed Longmire, and I'd be all for some contemporary settings if I wasn't so hooked in with what I'm doing already.
How about Outland? I thought that was a great western.
The Sean Connery?
Yeah,
I liked that. High Noon in Space.
exactly. Seemed like High Noon in the Alien universe.
Yeah.
Oh, we got another one.
Just a redneck saying that he's also in Utah.
Oh, good deal. Yep,
You have to
I
visit him at a
was
con.
raised in Montana, but I've probably been in Utah about as much now.
Well, where can people find you?
I'm probably most active on Twitter at David_J West, but on Facebook, James Alderdice has a Facebook page. My blog is terribly forgotten most of the time. I have been playing with the idea of trying to put together a podcast, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet, so I love the idea that you guys are out there doing it.
Well, anytime you want to come on, you are absolutely welcome.
Definitely.
For the time being, we're primarily focusing on trying to interview writers from Pulp Rev, because when we were doing this, originally this show was more about the writing technique, but the thing that we got more questions than anything else was, where can I find fiction that's good and it isn't woke?
Yeah.
And so we decided, yeah, seriously.
That's awesome.
So
How
we've
close are
decided-
you guys to the next graphic novel?
Mm. That I lost my artist. He suffered from TDS, and we don't. It was kind of a shame.
I'm
Because-
sorry to hear that because I really enjoyed those.
No, thank you.
And I appreciate that too. I mean, maybe I'll end up writing them as prose fiction, or I'll find somebody else. I do have a book in the works that's about to be released, but it's nonfiction, and I don't know.
What's it about?
Well, okay. First, realize the title is purely clickbait. It's totally intended to be clickbait, and once they read it, they'll realize it's something else.
Yes.
Okay.
It's entitled "Boobs of Steel: Busty Warriors and the Culture War."
Okay.
And the premise is that in this whole thing where woke has just completely smeared all over everything and has ruined comics and movies and especially fantasy sci-fi fiction.
Like what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, the immediate the foot in the door where it always starts is they will scream that character is sexist, and it's always one type of character, and is the curvaceous warrior woman. Is
Yeah.
always the one they go after. And it started when I started noticing that all of Kat's favorite characters were either getting killed or ruined or
just
yeah.
yeah.
And so I've written a nonfiction book about the phenomena, how it's played out in our press and our media, and just gone down the list. I do a whole thing on the Power Girl controversy. I do another one on the recent She-Ra controversy and how that became, it went from being a show about a sexually mature woman who didn't do anything sexual. She was just a hero.
Yeah.
To what it is now, which is essentially grooming for alternative lifestyles with a lot of adult content
And abuse.
I get into I debunk the idea that these sorts of characters alienate women. I do a whole thing about like the novel Friday and just the sheer number of women I've met who loved that novel. And I talked to John C. Wright about the topic, and he gave me a lot of good insight. And also, Che, Kit-san Che.
Yeah.
Also gave me some
The
comments.
last two guests, right?
Yeah, actually, that's how I got them on. Is I had asked them to comment, and then in the email I said, "Do you want to come on the show?" But yeah, I didn't realize you actually had written one of these warrior women, or would have asked you.
It's all good. What's funny is, go ahead.
The only thing I've had trouble with is I'm trying to get at least someone like Sarah Hoyt to comment, but it's been very hard to get women who write this stuff to say anything about their books. And I kind of understand.
Yeah. Yeah, my little girls are 6 and the older one just turned 14. Love the old She-Ra. They watched that all the time, and that was among their favorite shows. And that was right around the time when the new She-Ra was going to come out. So, of course, Netflix said, we're getting rid of the old one. Can't have that competing with the new one. And my little girls had no interest in the new one. And I even said that on Twitter, and I had a bunch of dorks typing doubt at me. And I'm like, whatever.
No, I remember watching the old She-Ra, and I liked it.
Yeah, my girls love it, and I don't mind watching it with them, as opposed to a bunch of other shows they like where I don't want to watch.
Oh, but even my dad would watch The Last Unicorn with me when I was a kid. Yes, The Last Unicorn's that old, but I don't care.
Yeah, my little girl loves Last Unicorn.
I've got that. I've got the graphic novel of The Last Unicorn. Yeah, that is an amazing story.
Yeah, one of my first cons, I got to hang out with Peter Beagle and talk with him about it, and it was great. He was a joy to talk with.
I got to talk to him very briefly, but he had a line out the door, so I wasn't gonna monopolize his time. But he was so nice.
So for me, I lucked out that nobody was there.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
And so I started talking with him about it, about the inspirations, and then about his mentor, Robert Nathan, who wrote Portrait of Jenny, which was one of my favorite stories from when I was a teenager. And he started talking about how Last Unicorn is his portrait of Jenny. He's just twisted it a little bit, and I loved that.
Thank you. I've never heard of Portrait of Jenny. I have another new thing to track down.
It's a weird little novella, but I think you could kind of see some parallels with Last Unicorn.
Interesting.
Does it have the same self-awareness of what it is?
No, because it's from a different perspective. The first person narrator would be more like the guy is meeting this woman that's strange. He meets her when she's a girl, and she keeps getting older every time he sees her. But it's weird. It's surreal.
Very cool. Well, we are now at the hour. So, like, where can people find you? Where can people get your books? Any last words for the audience?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being able to spend some time with you guys and pimp my books, which are mostly on Amazon, but I've got a couple on Smashwords. If someone like Wetnick ever catches me in Utah, I'll always have some books to sign in person. Most active on Twitter, but you can probably catch me most anywhere. My emails are out there. So thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for joining us. It was finally great to meet you. And to the listeners, quickly, all his links are in the description, including links to Amazon. So, but no, we'd been wanting to get you on the show for like 2 years now.
Yeah.
So it's great to finally have you on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks.
And again, if there's ever a topic you want to talk about, if there's anything you want to promote or just want to hang out, you are welcome to join us.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll be in touch.
Excellent. And thank you everyone in the chat and everyone watching this or listening to this for joining us this evening. And we will see you next week.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.